Okay, we're going on to a second item, the Constitution of Medina, or the Charter of Medina, which Muslims believed was put together by Muhammad around, well, soon after he moved to Medina. He used to live in Mecca. That's where he was born, according to the traditions, and he was there until 622, when he moved then up to Medina and put together this constitution, this charter. It used both names. Now, if you go on the internet, you will probably find this is the one they give you. This is the one they always show. And this is the Constitution of Medina, but it's not the full Constitution. It's only 27 articles. It's an abridged version, but it's the popular one you see all over the internet. And you can see it's made to look archaic, it's made to look old, so to give you the idea that that it is authentic. It's not authentic. It's nothing more than a facsimile of what people today believe was the Constitution of Medina. You will find many references to the Constitution of Medina on the internet, and there are quite a few references in certainly the Islamic traditions to this Constitution. How many articles? I have it right here. This is the one I got off, and this is the one you can probably pull off. This one is 47 articles. I've seen some that go all the way up to 67. But this is the one. This is the one that's probably the best accepted. This is a translation from Ibn Ishaq, or from Ibn Hisham, which is the story of Muhammad. Right up here. This book right up here, Ibn Hisham. So this is the Life of Muhammad, translated by Alfred Guillaume. This is the one I like to use the most because it's the most comprehensive, and also it follows the Arabic the best. So that's why I would recommend, if you want to see about Muhammad's life, use this one here. It is the classic that we always give to our students, and the one I recommend. Now, let's just walk through and see what it contains. When you read the 47 articles, you will see that they really talk about four things, four general areas. We don't have time to go through all of them. You can read them for yourself. Basically, the four things that are all the way through it is that there is a belief in God and the last days. There is an acceptance of Muhammad as the ultimate arbiter. That's acknowledged in the very first article, in the very last article. And that the people who signed this treaty are to help one another, that they're to fight their mutual enemies. And then they are also to contribute to the war effort. Now, Muslims claim that this constitution is the oldest constitution for mankind, and that's why they like to tout it so much. It's the oldest constitution for mankind. It's the oldest example of multi-faith and multiculturalism, and that's why they love it, because it shows that at the time of Muhammad, they got along. They were all working together. The Jews, the Jewish families, the Banu Nadir, Banu Qurayza, and the Banu Kainuka, especially those three they always mention, were actually participants to this treaty. And so that's why they got along, but this is a great model of what we should do today, and Muhammad was the first to do so. And then they also say that it is an egalitarian document guaranteeing religious liberty and equality. And this is one of the first of its kind to do so. And then, of course, for our purposes in this series, and this is what Muslims like to point out, they always point this out to me. In fact, that's come up in a number of your comments there in this whole series that we're looking at, trying to find Islam in the 7th century, that this document proves that Muhammad did exist in the 7th century, and that he lived in Mecca and Medina in the 7th century, and that he had this relationship with the Jews at that time. So for those reasons, those 5 or 6 reasons there, it's important for them. And that's why you see it's such a popular document. And that's why a number of you have asked, could you please talk about this constitution? Because this supports a 7th century Islam. This supports not only a 7th century Islam, a very benign, a very benevolent, a very egalitarian Islam. And it really raises the stature of Muhammad in our eyes today, because this is not the Muhammad we see in the later traditions, and it's certainly not the Muhammad we see in the Quran itself. So, what are we going to do? How are we going to answer that? Well, first and foremost, before we get into the dating, before we get into whether or not there's any document at all from the 7th century, let's talk about the contents a little bit more. And let's look at this very strong pro-Jewish, in fact, it's quite pro-Jewish all the way through. When you look at the different articles, I'm just going to number off a number of them to you. In Article 16, it says that the Jews will be helped and will be treated with equality. Well, that's good. That's good, yeah. Article 17, no Jew will be wronged. Okay, that's interesting. Article 18, the enemies of the Jews will follow us, who follow us will not be helped. So in other words, if you have enemies, we're not going to help them. That's good for the Jews as well. It's very proactive for Jews. Article 29, the Jews will contribute towards the war when fighting alongside the believers. So the Jews are asked to come and contribute because they're part of the community. Article 30, the next article, the Jews will be treated as one community with their religion respected. Well, don't we all want that? Of course we do. And then it lists the 8 Jews, or the late Jews, the leaders of, I guess, tribes or maybe families, who signed this article. The Bani al-Najjar, the Bani al-Hari, the Bani Sa'ida, the Bani Jusham, the Bani al-Aus, the Talba, the Japhna, and the Bani al-Shtaiba. You notice what's missing? You notice the 3 Jews tribes, the largest Jewish tribes, the one that Muhammad had problems with, are not in that. They're not signatories to this document. Hold on to that. We'll be getting to that probably in a secondary video. But fascinating that these are the signatories to this document. Article 34 then goes on. The Jews' allies will be given the same treatment as the Jews. And now Article 37, the Jews must bear their own expenses in war, and the Muslims bear their own expenses. So equality, back and forth. You bear your expenses, we'll bear our expenses. And also Article 43, that the Jews must pay for war with the Muslims. So they must pay they must pay their standing with the Muslims. And then Article 52, the Jews of Al-Aus have the same standing as other parties of the pact. So you can see over and over again, it's very benevolent, it's very benign, it's very accommodating to the Jews. Which begs the question, if it's so accommodating to the Jews, why is it we can't find any reference to this constitution in any Jewish documents? Why is it that no Jews have come forward at this time or any other time subsequent to 622 stating that this is a document that should help them? In some ways, this Constitution of Medina would be the equivalent to the Jews as the Ashkenazi is for the Copts or the Egyptian monks living there in St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt. Wouldn't you think? Remember, the Ashkenazi was created by the monks to protect them. Why is it Jews would? I mean, if I were a Jew and I was being persecuted, as Jews have been right through the last 1400 years by Islam, why would I be the first to hold this up as my document? We're going to talk about that in a subsequent video. But nonetheless, that's the first problem. That's the first big problem. It's so pro-Jewish, it's so benevolent to Judaism, that I would suggest that Jews would have been the first to acknowledge it and first to support it and first to give authority to it. So where are the Jews today who are doing so? And if you are a Jew watching this, tell me, do you support this? Do you acknowledge this? Is this a document that you should be holding up? Is Israel using this document in their foreign policy with all the Muslims around them? Have you seen it? Show me. I'd like to know why Jews aren't jumping on this, why they aren't grabbing this and touting it as their relationship, because they can put Muhammad's name onto it if they want to. Now, there are problems. So that's the first problem. No record of this in any Jewish document. What's interesting also, according to all the scholars who have studied this part of the world and looked at documents, namely Robert Hoyland, this man here, this is his book here, Robert Hoyland. Boy, it's a tome. It's a full, and it's called Seeing Islam as Others Saw It. He has done the best work. I think this was published in 1997, where he went through all the documents, looked through all the inscriptions. I've been using an awful lot of his material. It's a huge book. And in 554, 550, between pages 550 and 554, he talks about the Constitution of Medina. And though he says it's there, it is there in the later traditions. His only support he can go give for it are the later traditions. But he brings up a very interesting point in his book. He says, take a look at all the documents we can find, and there are many Jewish documents. He refers to a tomb inscription in Hegra, Let me just show you a map here. Where is Hegera? Well, here is Medina right here. There's Medina right there. Here's Mecca way down here. Medina is in the red. Mecca is in the red. There is Hegera, which is here at Medina Salih. Today it's known as Medina Salih. That's the current name today in Arabia. So he's talking about a tomb in this city. And you notice he says that's where the Jews were. There's also a reference to another tomb in Taima. Well, let's see. Taima's way up here. Way up here. There's Taima. There's Hegera. There's Taima. And then he talks about another tomb that is found in Al-Ula, which is here. So there are Jews living. These are all Jewish tombs. These are inscriptions by Jews in these three cities further north. But there, as he goes on, it says there is no reference to any Jew anywhere in Medina. Not, and let me just quote him, not a single clearly Jewish inscription that has yet been found in Mecca or Yathrib. Yathrib is the archaic name for Medina, what is now Medina today, or Khaybar, despite quite a number of epigraphic surveys conducted at all three sites. So what he's saying is there has not been any reference to Jews or any idea of any Jews living in these three areas that are circled in red. Mecca, Medina, this would be Khaybar, that would be Yathrib there. But there are Jews further north. So archaeologically speaking, there's a problem here as well. How could there be Jews that have been there for generations? Because remember, they were there long before Muhammad was there, according to the traditions. And I keep on saying that, according to the traditions, the Jews were there, but according to archaeology, according to history, according to all the references that we can find, we can't find any reference to Jews that far south. So let's continue on. There's a second big problem. When you look at the Sirah and the Hadith, you will find that this document completely contradicts what we see in the Sirah and the Hadith. In the Sirah and the Hadith, there is not this benevolence, there is not this benign relationship. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You will see that there are references. If you look at Sahih Bukhari, volume 5, Hadith number 362, let's see what he says about these three Jewish tribes. And let's see what Bukhari says. Remember, Bukhari is writing in 870, so this is the 9th century, and this is what he says about the Jews, narrated by Abdullah ibn Umar. There's the Isnad. The Banu al-Nadir and the Banu Qurayza fought with the Prophet, violating their peace treaty. This is the reference to the Constitution Medina. This is where you get the Constitution Medina. You get it not only in Ibn Hisham in 833, but you also get it here in Al-Bukhari, Sahih Bukhari in 870. So the Prophet exiled the Banu al-Nadir and allowed the Banu Qurayza to remain in their homes, taking nothing from them till they fought the Prophet. He then killed their men and distributed their women, children, and property among the Muslims. But some of them came to the Prophet, and he granted them safety, and they embraced Islam. He exiled all the Jews from Medina. They were the Jews of the Banu Qaynuqa, the tribe of Abdul al-Salim, and the Jews of Banu Harith, all the other Jews of Medina. That would have been post 627. So it's very clear here that this treaty, if it is so benign, benevolent, it did not work. Or according to the traditions, there was almost all the Jews reneged on it. Yet you look at all the names that we did, 8 different Jewish tribes. This says that they were all thrown out of Medina. Every one of them. All the Jews were thrown out of Medina or killed. Yet according to the article number 31, there are 8 different Jewish tribes that signed it. Did they all renege? Were they all thrown out then later on, subsequently? So you can see there's a contradiction between the Sirah and the Hadith and also what we see in the Constitution Medina. And I'm going to show you the significance of that in another video. I'm going to talk about why this is important. Now, even the isnads, when you look at the traditions concerning this event, you will see that there are variations of different isnads concerning the Constitution Medina. Abu Ubaid does not have the same isnad list that Ibn Ishaq or Ibn Hisham has. And what's fascinating, they all received their isnads from the Egyptians, not from the Medinas, and they were all from the 9th century, much, much too late. If you go to the Quran itself, you will see that the Quran doesn't talk about this event. And if anything, why doesn't the Quran talk about this event if the Quran continues right up until 632? Because this happened in 622, or soon after 622. Now, R.B. Sargent disagrees. He does say that you can find this reference in Surah 3, Ayah 101 to 104. So let's just take a look and see. And I'm going to read. Actually, I've got it right here. So let me just read it 03, Ayah 01. And this is fascinating because he's in some ways he's trying to find this, and you can see why a lot of followers, people who want to support the traditions, have to find it in the Quran. And this is what it says here. Hold fast, all of you together, to the rope of Allah, and be not divided among yourselves. Remember Allah's favor on you, and you were enemies one to another. So you were enemies at the beginning, as he says. But he joined your hearts together. See, he joined your hearts together. And he says, see, this is the constitution of Medina. So that by his grace you became brethren. You became brethren because of the constitution of Medina. And you were in the brink of a pit of fire, and he saved you from it. Thus Allah makes his ayat clear to you that you may be guided. And then verse 104, Sargent continues to say, let there arise out of you a group of people inviting to all that is good, enjoining al-mahruf, in other words, monotheism, and forbidding al-munkar, which means polytheism, and it is they who are the successful. And Sargent says that is proof that this is referring to the Constitution of Medina. No, it's not referring to any constitution. It looks like it's just referring to the fact that these people, anybody who believes in monotheism, should come together. There's no reference to any specific document, certainly not this document. Oh, before we go, let me just think of something else. If this were true, if chapter 3, verse 103 and 104, as Sargent says, refers to the Constitution, what are you going to do with the other references in the Quran? What are you going to do with chapter 4, verse 56? What are you going to do with chapter 1, verse 7? The Fatiha, the very last verse of the Fatiha, about those who God hates, which is referring to the Jews. What are you going to do about chapter 5, verse 51, where it says, do not take as friends Jews and Christians, for he who is a friend of one of them is one of them. Or what about the verse on the jizya tax, chapter 9, verse 29? Make war on the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians. So you can see reference after reference after reference in the Quran is very anti-Jew, is strongly against Jews. Chapter 4, verse 56 talks about the flesh of Jews being burned away and how they've been replaced to be burned again. It's highly anti-Jewish. That also confronts the Constitution of Medina. So that I would say the Quran does not support the Constitution of Medina. It does just the opposite. So then we go on and let's ask, even when you look at the authority of Muhammad, when you look at his authority in both the beginning and the end, the first article and the last article, 47, when it says that he will be an arbiter between man and God, and that God, Allah, will be their God, and that you are to believe in the last days, things like this, what Jew would ever sign a treaty like that? What Jew would ever sign a treaty like that? I'm a Christian, and I would never sign a treaty like that. If it was stipulated that I had to follow Allah and I had to follow His Prophet and let Allah and Muhammad be the arbiter between man and God, for me, no, I wouldn't sign any treaty like that. And that's probably why we don't find it in any Jewish sources. But then I want to end with this last problem, and that is the dates. See, I have been asking all through this series to find anything from the 7th century. It's very clear here that this is the man who's done probably the best work. Hoyland has done the best work on looking at all the documentation from the 7th and 8th century, from the time of Muhammad, from the time of Islam, when it began. And he is very clear that this document is not, there is no vestiges of it from the 7th century. They all come from much, much later. And this is something that others bring up. Let me just read what Fred Donor says. Fred Donor, who is a well-known Islamicist, he says, the Ummah document, I quote him, sometimes also called the Constitution of Medina, Sahifa document, or the Sunnah Jamiyah, is a group of connected documents or treaties clauses apparently concluded or between the Prophet Muhammad and the people of Yathrib, now Medina. The original documents are now lost, but the text is somehow preserved with mostly minor variations in two early Islamic literary texts, the Sirah, the biography of Muhammad, written first by Ibn Ishaq in 765, but we don't have that, so we go to Ibn Hisham, 833, and the Kitab al-Amwal, which is the Abu Ubaid al-Qasim ibn Salim from 838. So it's even later than Ibn Hisham. So both the documents that Donor is referring to are from the first half of the 9th century, basically 200 years after the fact. That's the best you can get. So when you look at the dates, you can see pretty much this is not a 7th century document. This is a 9th century document, redacted back to what the 9th century Muslims considered to have happened. Now, a 9th century document or constitution that they believed existed 200 years earlier. Frederick M. Denny says this: Ibn Ishaq preserved this ancient document which does not appear in any other historical source. In his Sirah, it is placed for logical reasons near the beginning of his account of the Medinan period, but we do not know for sure that it belongs there. It seems to consist of separate documents from differing times in Medina, edited together in the forms preserved in the Sirah. There is little doubt among scholars that it is authentic and that, like the Quran, is intimately connected with Muhammad's thought and activity. Isn't that interesting? So he's admitting that this is put together over the time, but it comes from the Sirah. But therefore the scholars, and this is what's fascinating, that's why I added this in there, the scholars, however, think it's authentic. I would love those same scholars to talk about the gospel accounts, which they believe all came about from the 4th, 5th, and 6th century. How come they're not using the same standard? Because their viewpoint is that's the earliest documents we have for the New Testament documents. The earliest document we have for the entire New Testament is from the 4th century. Therefore, almost all the scholars, liberal scholars today, are saying, therefore it is a 4th century document, without even looking at the fact that there are hundreds of documents that predate the 4th century, the New Testament documentation. But here, people like Denny suggest that this is authentic. Why? Because we have it in a document that's 200 years after the fact. 200 years after the fact. It's almost as if, really, all we have is based on documentation that comes 2 centuries later. It's as if the world of the War of 1812 between the United States and the United Kingdom were written in 2012, or that the Battle of Waterloo, this famous battle with the French, that was a document. In fact, the first reference we have is not written till 2015. Can you imagine that anybody could accept that as historically valid? And yet that's exactly what people like Denny are suggesting. It's because of that I want to end with a quote from Dr. Pat Andrews, who says this: If there is no extant archaeological evidence for Jews in Yathrib, which later is Medina, then it is impossible that the so-called Constitution of Medina is historically valid. It is a legendary, apocryphal construct. And I think that's the difficulty with many of those who would like to put it back. Even the modern scholars are wrestling with the fact that they would like to see it at the time that the 9th century attributes. But these are nothing more than 9th century redactions. Still looking for any documentation, any support for a man named Muhammad, a city called Mecca, a people called Muslims, a religion called Islam, and a book called the Quran that is prior to 690. Well, this is Jay, still waiting. Wish some more of you Muslims could jump into this, or others that would try to come up with any type of documentation. We're struggling to find that ubiquitous religion called Islam in the time period it supposedly was created. Okay, this is Jay, over and out, here in my